So, Kate, I know you came here in those days in 2016, I think, with the
Yeah,
project
October
Zero.
2016.
Uh-huh. In yeah, in below of Zero One with this project, American Arts Incubators. But you weren't the invited artist. You were more like the director of the whole project, of the whole experience, and you were directing this experience in some other countries as well, right? Is your work related with arts because you are an artist, or is it because it's your interest to work with artists?
I think that I was born an artist, and then society, family, and fear
Mm.
disappeared all of that or repressed it. And then I maybe even subconsciously found my way back to the
Mm-hmm.
art through my work
Yeah.
and through things like program management. And then being immersed in the art scene somehow simultaneously like reinvigorated my inner artist, and I started to make artwork at the same time.
Yeah.
So I was directing an arts program while at the same time discovering my own artwork. It's so cliche, but I don't know if I chose it as much as it chose me. I think a lot of people would, agree that it's not the easy route.
Yeah.
You face financial challenge, you face potentially family or social challenge, and yet I started to. The more I experimented, the more I believed that it's an important tool to address our social challenges. And, you know, this idea of belonging and othering and systemic oppression across all the different identities and all of that. There are lots of different ways to address and try to help fix this mess that we've created. And for me, art was one of the ways that felt most satisfying. So if I want to try to solve problems and at the same time be happy as a human being, it had to be art. I think art for me started as a kid when I would spend time with my girlfriends. We were probably 13, 14, and we would take up entire afternoons or even 2 days sometimes to create a project that had no significance at all. And we called them social experiments, but I look back and it was straight up social art. We would, for example, we would get into costume and there would be 4 of us, and we would play the Mission Impossible theme song, like dun, 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 and with the boom box on our shoulder and sunglasses and like hunter's caps, like winter caps and trench coats and sandals, like flip flops.
Yeah.
And we would march in single file and just look straight ahead. We would take these like right angle turns at the aisles through this grocery store. And our entire objective was to flash the Trix rabbit on the cereal box. And I look back at these kinds of, I don't know, basically like public installations of social art.
It's performance,
And that was absolutely the happiest I can remember being as a kid, was just this like co-creative process. And the more I reflected on that, the more I tried to distill what were the ingredients that made it so captivating. and it was the play. That we didn't care what we looked like. We didn't have a purpose necessarily, like outside of whatever we created. We wanted to do it again. We were having fun, and we were ready for spontaneity. So all of the criteria of play, and then mixed with the collaboration. Where if I were just doing that on my own, it wouldn't have felt so magic for me.
Mm-hmm.
But because we were doing it together, and it was like this 1 + 1 = 4, because we would build on one another's ideas. That's when I think for me the seed was planted that now guides all the work that I do.
Mm-hmm.
Try to infuse this art, movement, and play into my work.
Yeah, nice. It's a nice image.
I had plenty of projects ever since I was old enough to create something, but I think the first public commissioned professional artist work was called Emergence, and it was I was partnering with my longtime friend Eve Warnock, and we were looking at the emergence of a new creature in the sea that develops like a new kind of intelligence because of the damage that we're doing to the environment and to our oceans. And that these creatures then came up onto land, and we did a performance to show what that might look like. We used a bunch of beautiful costume and LED. It was along the Pacific Ocean in Santa Cruz, California.
Mm-hmm.
I think the first artworks that I made, I can't remember which was specifically first, but it was always performative, it was always collaborative, and it was usually silly. Another one that I'm remembering is that a friend and I, during the high school basketball games, when the gymnasium is packed and the whole thing with the cheerleaders and the band and all of it, and my friend would go over to the opposite bleachers, and I would stay where I was, and we would do this game of copycat, where I would put my arms straight up in the air, and then she would put her arms straight up in the air, and then she would run across the top, and then I would run across the top, and we were fearless and invincible in our clowning, really. And it was, I would say, those were the first. Yeah, those were we didn't think of it as art at the time, but I look back at it and it was totally art.
Exactly.
My current, so I have this mind map that has the words in the middle say movements of belonging. And then there are 6 major areas of this mind map, a bunch of spokes.
Mm-hmm.
And so slowly but surely I'm kind of making my way through this mind map to add in the different pieces. But right now, one of the movements of belonging that I've been focusing on really for the last couple of years is called social movement. And social movement is, on the very outside, it looks like it could just be an exercise dance class kind of thing. But once you peek into the inside, it becomes much more. First, it's highly accessible. So a 4-year-old can do it, a 94-year-old can do it. We've had people in wheelchairs, we've had cancer patients, we've had families, we've had all different socioeconomic classes and genders, and just it's movement for every body, physical body. You can be laying in your bed and you can still participate. And another piece of it is that we are focusing on doing things that feel good in your body. So it's not about watching me, the teacher, it's about listening to the prompts and then finding what feels good in your own body. For example, we're going to find circles. And so you could find circles in your shoulders, like I am, or you could find circles anywhere else in your body. You could circle through your hips or your eyeballs, or run in circles around the room. They could be big, they could be small. And so I guide people through this exploration of what I call kinesthetic art inside the body. So moving from dance as a visual art to movement as a kinesthetic art. So you get to be your own kinesthetic artist and play with, oh, what does that feel like if I turn my big circle to a small circle? Super simple stuff. The art piece of it for me is that I design these experiments, I call them. I have the book right here. Where is it? So when I'm just hanging out at night and dancing in my living room, I come up with these different experiments. And I mean, you can see, like, this one's called Planet Visits.
Wow.
This one's called Shake It Up.
Shake It Up.
Reach Up, Reach Out. Body Part Orchestra. Tug of War. Puppeteer.
What's that book? Is that a kind of manual or something?
It's just a blank journal.
All right.
And so it's becoming my recipe book.
Recipe.
I mean, to me, they're recipes for the different experiments that I include in the social movement series. I'm really enjoying coming up with these different experiments, and each time I go to write one down, I have the same sense of, I could come up with these forever. Like a comic could come up with a different kind of joke forever.
Yeah.
I feel like I've tapped into some weird, like, superpower where I get to kind of think in cartoon. I get to feel in my body. I get to dance around silly. All the things that I wanted to do, but yet able to frame it in some kind of social justice movement that I'm still trying to figure out.
It sounds, I mean, you find it, like you found something that is inclusive. And you know, art is always about the in relation with the space. I mean, to experience art, it has to do with the spaces as well. And you know, these three-dimensional things is to move your body in three-dimensional. And we also had this, when I was doing my master there in the Netherlands, we thought, if you take all the skills of an artist and you take out also all the materials or objects or you know, the material access, so what is left is their own body. And that includes their voice, you know. It's inside, it's what it is inside. So an artist has to cultivate the body and the voice, you know, the mind, and that's how it works. I mean, we don't have resources, we don't have spaces all the time. We see it now with this pandemic. We don't have museums open all the time. We don't, but art still happens. It is going on. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that, Alejandro. It's like, just to give you a sense, I guess. The other night, I start moving. I'm just dancing to music, and then I close my eyes and I notice what the sound does to my body, and I'm like, oh, this makes me want to do long, continuous stretches. And then I start to think, like, what else looks like that? I was like, oh, taffy, like saltwater taffy. When you stretch it, like, that's exactly how my body feels right now. And then I write a story about saltwater taffy in the body, basically, and then I write out the way to guide it for somebody else, you know?
Uh-huh.
So it's me just getting to play and make this art inside my body. I feel so lucky
Yeah.
to be open to these gifts, I guess. And I think I've told you about the more visual artistic piece of it before, of the silhouette, and having people experience social movement, but getting to see their silhouettes like all around the room in projected light in almost real time potentially, and that we can then play with the aesthetics of those silhouettes and what they do and how they move to the tempo and things like that. I mean, that could be in a dance club scene, that could be in a school phys ed class, physical education, that could be in a senior's home or a cancer rehab center or any of that. As a kid, I wanted to be a teacher, a psychologist, or some kind of performer. And I think that holds true, that I would do some kind of teaching. I would want to be in some kind of teaching situation where I also got to be a student.
Yeah, it's something that you are already doing with your art. Yeah. And there's this Grant Kester. He was invited to the MDE. We have this big event.
Como managing, like
yes, MDE. They started doing it on the 2007. Yeah, and I think it was in the version of 2011 when they invited a lot of people thinking on this notion of arts and pedagogy. So yeah, I guess, and they call it like the twist or the turn of pedagogy in arts.
Nathan Ober and Jean Felice partnered with us on doing some outdoor projection that was absolutely beautiful on this big lighthouse near the ocean. And that performance was the first time I went home and laid down and said, oh damn, I'm an artist. And from that point, the confidence started to build, and it was like, oh, I can do this. I've been doing this in my head forever. Now I can do this like out loud.
Nice.
Yeah.
It is really important for we when we were working in these labs of Desde Arte Paz, I don't know if we had talked about it, and like
what number did you get to?
Huh?
What number did you get to?
62. You are in 62. Yeah. But what the main thing that we are working on is in the confidence of the participants. And it's actually the confidence of artists and the confidence of teachers. It's something that is like building up your own opinion, your own discourse, your own voice, and then you have a space to express it and to validate it and to show it. This is a gallery, it's already in the museum, it's already there on the walls, and that is confidence.
That's the creative agency piece. That I think is so important, because I know how important it was for me and how important it is every day to remember that I have this creative power. Another piece that I'll definitely show a picture of, so maybe I'll just make a comment about this in case it fits into the video. I play with this format that I call contributory art. And my contributory art projects mean that I come up with some kind of parameter, whether that's aesthetics or content or materials, or all of the above, but then I open it up to the public to actually contribute their own creative inputs within this artwork. And that may be tangible and visual, it may be movement based, it may be video. The medium is less important, but the idea is that with multiple contributions, you start to see something take shape that first I never would have imagined in my head because I can't be in everybody's head. And second, that starts to show us something about who's in the room. So I did a project called Spice Star for an organization called No Immigrants, No Spice. And it was to amplify the value that immigrants bring to the US culture. And I created a mosaic of cardboard pieces that were just to be glued in a certain like puzzle shape onto a giant piece of wood, and then gave people a bunch of different spices like ginger and cinnamon and cayenne pepper, and I was using the colors to choose the spice, but also the different regions of the world. And then little kids or anybody that showed up, mostly adults, showed up to this event, and they made their little mosaic piece with their way of glue and spices, and it got put into this bigger mosaic. And people just light up when they see that their contribution is part of the whole, and they watch it grow over the period of the event.
Yeah.
Or at Yerba Buena Center for the Arts, I was a fellow there for a year, and we were exploring where is the public imagination. And my response to that was that our public imagination is where diversity co-creates. And I gave people a 32-foot by 8-foot space to have someone trace their body so that you could see their silhouette. And then they would switch and the other person would get traced. And then they would use silver or dark orange paint marker to fill in the overlaps so that you could actually see where they were physically exchanging space, right? And that was called Meet My Shadow. So that'll be a decent visual, I think. So yeah, that helps warm up a couple of the images I'll share.
Yeah, it's very nice. It's always about the body and this thing with the species or spices. There is a comedian that he says, like, talking about the British, they conquer the whole world to exchange spices, but then in the food, what happened with the food? British food doesn't have all those spices.
Wow, that is such a good point. They were like, oh wait, the slaves are more valuable.
Good. Kate, it was. Thank you so much for admitting, accepting this call, and to give us this nice moment. And it's always good to see you and to talk with you. Yeah.
I've been really missing Medellin. I mean, this is the longest I haven't been there in my whole Medellin life. Abrazote.
Chao. Nos vemos.
Chao.
Abrazos.
Nos vemos. Porfa.